Good evening, good afternoon, citizens of the world. My name is Jason Bainbridge, and this is my weekly report. Let's get started. Things are pretty exciting. Benjamin Fulford has reappeared. I actually thought the guy had been knocked off. I thought that he'd got himself into a double cross between the Illuminati and the, at the time, so-called secret societies that being represented by the White Dragon. So let's start off August 27, 2013, not too long ago. This is a post posted by Benjamin Fulford, and you can find him on benjaminfulford.net. He was the Forbes bureau chief in Asia for 5 years, and his job was to talk to all the major political movers and shakers. Now, he states, the final takedown of the criminal cabal that illegally seized control of many Western countries is underway. According to multiple sources in the Pentagon, MI5, the Italian P2, Freemason Lodge, and in various Asian power centers. The ongoing attempts by these religious fanatics, criminals, to start Armageddon, this time with an operation in Syria, is nothing more than a sign of desperation. The list of countries that has agreed to attack Syria based on the obvious cabal staged poisonous gas attack in Syria is also a list of the countries still under cabal control. These are the US, Canada, to his deep shame, France, Israel, Italy, Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. The fact that no other NATO countries, notably Germany, are not participating is a sign that the cabal no longer controls the NATO alliance. Globally, the cabal now controls only 8 out of the 195 nations on Earth. It is true these cabal-controlled nations still control considerable military power on paper, but it is extremely unlikely that the Pentagon will go along with the latest cabal gambit. With their point of view, it is difficult to see what sort of legitimate US interests would be served by attacking Syria. Instead, they realize this latest horror is just a desperate attempt to start war in order to save cabal control of the financial system. This is not going to be allowed. On that front, a White Dragon Society representative will meet this week with holders of historical Asian bonds issued by the Federal Reserve Board in order to begin moves to either force the Feds to either cash them or be declared bankrupt. So there you have it. Now, he was also saying this very early on in July as well, and you can find his video on YouTube. It's titled Benjamin Fulford Message Who's Who, so you can Google that, YouTube that, and you'll get the whole story. Now let's go and take a look at what's happened around Syria. Okay, so how the house of cards starting to fall? Well, it starts with the UK, their main ally. The UK has ruled out any new vote on the military strike. The government has ruled out a rerun of the vote on military action in Syria, the Foreign Secretary has said. William Hague said ministers could not go back every week to something MPs rejected. It came after the US delayed strikes until the Congress approves them. The US now says it has evidence the chemical nerve agent sarin was used in a deadly attack in Damascus last month. On Thursday, MPs voted against the principle of taking military action over the suspected attack. They blocked the motion to support military action if backed by evidence from UN weapons inspectors. The government lost by 13 votes after almost 40 MPs from the two coalition parties joined Labour in siding against the motion. So there you have it. The Labour parties and the Socialist parties are starting to win here. Some senior politicians, including former Westminster Party leaders Lord Ashdown and Lord Howard and former Foreign Secretary Sir Malcolm Rifkin, have said that the US delay pending congressional approval for strikes could allow the House of Commons to think again. Think again? Since then, US Secretary of State John Kerry has said samples from blood gathered after the attack on the 21st of August, which the US says was carried out by the regime, tested positive for signatures of sarin. Well, that was obvious, wasn't it? Just go and look at the video footage. Of course it was a chemical attack. So this case is building, and this case will continue to build, he said. But Syrian Deputy Foreign Minister Faisal Miqdad told the BBC that any military action against Syria would amount to support for Al-Qaeda, which was originally CIA built, and its affiliates, claiming armed groups backed by America have used chemical weapons, not Syrian troops. Now, let's go to the rest of the world on this issue. Let's go to Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin has challenged the US to present the UN evidence that Syria attacked rebels with chemical weapons near Damascus. Mr. Putin said it would be utter nonsense for Syria's government to provoke opponents with such attacks. US President Barack Obama says he is considering military action against Syria after intelligence reports that 1,429 people were killed on the 21st of August. UN's weapons inspectors have now left Syria and arrived in the Netherlands. They are taking the evidence they gathered during the 4 days of state visits to the Organization for the Prevention of Chemical Weapons in The Hague. The BBC security correspondent Frank Gardner examines what we know about the Syria attack on the 21st of August. The samples are thought to include soil, swabs from munitions, blood, and hair from the victims, and experts say possibly even flesh from the dead bodies. Ooh, macabre. The UN has said its inspectors have been able to carry out a wide range of fact-finding activities. However, their mandate is limited to determining the use of chemical weapons and not who used them. UN spokesman Martin Nasurki refused to set a time frame for the results of lab tests and the inspectors' full report. He described as grotesque the suggestion that the departure of inspectors from Syria somehow opens a window for military action. The UN's humanitarian work in Syria would continue, he said. Now, let's go over to China and see what China has to say on the issue. Turning to Syria, Chinese state media and commentators continue to warn against a US military strike against Syria before the result of a UN weapons inspector's investigation into an apparent chemical weapon attack is released. Now, if the United States really has lost the patience to wait for the findings of an authoritative UN inspection, this is not only the sorrow of the world, it is the United States' own sorrow, urges the People's Daily, a Communist Party newspaper. Following a UK Parliament vote against military intervention in Syria last week, the Chinese media also questioned whether the US will fight the battle alone should it launch a military strike in Syria. Obama and the US Secretary of State Kerry obviously misjudged the situation. The UK Parliament gave the White House a heavy blow. The morale of Syrian government army will not collapse as easily as imagined in the face of airstrikes. It will be hard for the US to win gloriously or bow out successfully, says the Global Times. Now, of course, there has been comments saying that Syria's on fire anyway. I mean, what are more weapons going to do? They're already fighting a war. They've been locked up in this CIA-backed rebel group attempted coup for quite some time now. Now let's go and look at the world. And the US and its allies are considering military action against sites in Syria. But what do countries in the region and beyond think about possible action? Now, all of these items, all these articles that I'm reading from you are from the BBC. So that you can go to www.bbc.co.uk and it's all come out fresh today. Let's look at the US now. Following a cautious reaction to the initial reports of a chemical weapons attack, American rhetoric has hardened. Secretary of State John Kerry said the use of chemical weapons by the Syrian government was undeniable and a moral obscenity. Washington has recently bolstered its naval presence in the Eastern Mediterranean, prompting speculation that preparation for an attack is underway. Analysts believe that the most likely US action would be sea-launched cruise missiles targeting Syrian military installations. However, support for military action among the US public is not clear-cut, with opinion polls suggesting that about half of Americans oppose even a limited strike. Over to the UK, the government motion in support of military action in Syria has been rejected by MPs in Parliament, forcing the UK to rule out any joint intervention. This was seen as a blow for the government of Prime Minister David Cameron. However, the Prime Minister says he supports the idea even though he respects the vote. So here you have the cabal itself being thrown to the wind by the elite. In the process of saving their fortune and, in fact, saving their lives, because with the numbers of the leaders in the elite being 10,000 and the overwhelming majority of people against them, the odds are strictly not in their favor. So they're doing a throwback and a reversal, and they're retreating to save themselves and what power they have left, and of course their trillions of dollars. Okay, France President Francois Hollande has said France is prepared to go ahead with military intervention, even though the UK will play no part in any action. France wants firm and proportionate action against the Damascus regime, he told a French newspaper, and indicated it would come within the week. France has been amongst the most hawkish Western countries with regard to Syria, being the first Western power to recognize the main opposition coalition as the Syrian people's legitimate representative. In May, France, along with the UK, successfully lobbied for the EU's arms embargo to be lifted so as to allow further supplies to the rebels. Russia now. Russia is one of Mr. Assad's most important international backers and has stressed the need for a political solution to the crisis. It has sharply criticized any possibility of Western strikes on Syria, saying action taken outside the UN Security Council threatened catastrophic consequences for other countries of the Middle East and Northern Africa. China has joined Russia in blocking resolutions critical of Syria in the UN Security Council. It has also criticized the prospects of strikes against Syria. The official news agency Xinhua said Western powers were rushing to conclusions about who might have used chemicals in Syria before UN inspectors had completed their investigation. Over to Germany now. Berlin has ruled itself out of participation in any military action. Foreign Minister Guido Westerwelle told a German newspaper that such participation has not been sought, nor is it being considered by us. Germany has said in the past that proof of the use of chemical weapons by the government of Bashar al-Assad would demand consequences, but has not set out what those consequences should be. Over to Syria's neighbors now. Turkey. The Turkish government has been one of the most vocal critics of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad since early on in the uprising. Turkish Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu told Turkey's Milliyet newspaper that the country was ready to join an international coalition for action against Syria, even in the absence of agreement at the UN Security Council. Now let's go over to Saudi Arabia and the Gulf. The monarchies of the Gulf are reported to be key funders of the rebel forces and suppliers to them of arms. Saudi Arabia has been a rival of the Syrian government for years and has been particularly active in pushing for action against Mr. Assad. At a meeting of the Arab League on the 1st of September, Saudi Foreign Minister Saad al-Faisal called for all legal means possible to be used to stop the bloodshed in Syria. And over to Israel. Despite initially avoiding becoming involved in the conflict, Israel has carried out 3 strikes on targets in Syria this year, reportedly to prevent weapons shipments reaching the Lebanese Hezbollah militia. which has a close alliance with the Syrian government. Shelling and gunfire from Syria has also hit the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights during return Israeli fire. Now, all of these items you can find on RT News. More recently, Israeli officials have condemned the alleged use of chemical weapons by Syrian forces and hinted at support for military action. Our finger must be always on the pulse. Ours is a responsible finger, and if necessary, it will also be on the trigger, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said. However, Israel officials will be aware that any Western action against Syria risks a repeat of events in the First Gulf War in 1991, when Iraq attacked Tel Aviv with Scud missiles in an attempt to draw Israel into the conflict and prompt the withdrawal of Arab countries from the war. Reports say demand for gas masks in Israel has increased in response to speculation over military action. Now, Lebanon. There is deep division in the country between supporters and opponents of President Assad. Lebanese Foreign Minister Adnan Mansour told Lebanese radio that he did not support the idea of strikes on Syria, saying, "I don't think this action would serve peace, stability, and security in the region." And he's absolutely right. 2 bomb attacks which killed almost 60 people in Lebanon in August were linked to tensions over the Syrian conflict. Lebanese Shia militant movement Hezbollah has openly taken part in combat in Syria on the side of the government, and there have been reports of some in the Sunni community fighting on the side of the rebels. In addition, the country is already playing host to the largest number of Syrian refugees of any country. Let's go to Jordan. Information Minister Mohammed Momani told the AFP News agency that Jordan would not be used as a launch pad for any military action against Syria. Jordan renews its calls for a political solution in Syria and urges the international community to intensify efforts to reach such a solution. He said Jordan's armed forces are capable of defending the country. Senior military officials from Western and Middle Eastern countries have met in Jordan to discuss possible military intervention scenarios. Now, Iran. Iran has been Syria's main backer in the region since well before the current conflict and has been highly critical of any prospect of intervention. It has warned a top UN official visiting Tehran of serious consequences of any military action. Foreign Ministry spokesman Abbas Araghchi has repeated claims that it was in fact rebels who used chemical weapons, AFP reports. Iraq. Iraq has not been as critical of Syria as other Arab countries and will also be concerned at the effect that any escalation in Syria could have on increasing sectarian violence. So this will affect the sectarian violence in the area. We have been against military action and we are hoping for a peaceful political solution to the crisis, said Ali al-Wasawi, media advisor to Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. Finally, in Egypt, in June, Egypt's then President Mohamed Morsi cut off relations with Syria and called for a no-fly zone. However, after Mr. Morsi was removed from office by the army, the new authorities have taken a more cautious stance. Egypt's interim foreign minister, Nabil Fahmy, has said that there is no military solution to the Syrian crisis, and the solution must be a political solution. Again, you might be wondering why Jason is so passionate about this. When I was in my early 20s at Auckland University, I was involved in a movement to make nuclear weapons illegal. And myself and an Irish gentleman named Martin, we were the first 2 people involved in New Zealand. And we started the whole thing rolling by going to talk to schools and talking about the dangers of nuclear weapons. And well, this went all the way up to the United Nations, to my surprise, and it became illegal to use weapons of mass destruction. So, boy, was I shocked when they launched a war in Iraq using that very same law of weapons of mass destruction. And that's why I kind of feel a little bit associated with this and passionate about this, because that's not what we were trying to achieve. But look at these gangsters, cartel, these cabal members, and the Corporation of the United States of America running their drugs, running their guns, and causing absolute chaos around the world. So we're quite glad after 8 years that finally Bush has been indicted, and the road to indict Obama has also taken place. I sent the video out last week. It's very real, and people actually, didn't really consider what I was saying to be very serious, but we were very serious at the time, and I'm still very serious about it. These people are gangsters. They have usurped the power of the nations, and there's only 8 left. And we need to take those nations back, and we need to install proper democracy, and we need to make sure that gangsters are not allowed to run any more of our governments, and that our financial system is transparent, and our political system is transparent, because you, the people, you need to rely on the fact that your children and your grandchildren are going to have a safe and secure future. So that's why we do it. We may be 1 in 10, we may be 1 in 20, but we do it. So that was me for today. That's my weekly report, and that was the United Kingdom backing down on Syrian attacks. Thank you very much.